All right, everybody, welcome back. I have a few questions up here that some people asked in their reading responses from this past week. So I want to just go over some of these before we jump into the assignment for this week. And so one of the questions that I think some of you might be interested in is as a distance student, do I have access to the Writing Center? Okay, and so the answer to that is yes. And I just want to show you where to go here. If this thing gets off my screen here. All right, there we go. Okay. I'm going over here to the, I guess it didn't pop up. Let's see here, Writing Center. Texas Tech. Just go right to the home page of the Texas Tech Writing Center. Slowly get there. All right, so I want to show you how to get into the Writing Center if you are a distance student and just can't make an appointment and actually go in during their regular hours. I'm going to go up here to log in. Okay, and it already recognizes me since I'm logged into the university server right now. But you can see that you have an option here just to submit a draft. Okay, and you have to plug in all of this information about, you'll put our class number, the history 4307, due date, etc. You'll have to explain what the purpose of the assignment is and everything. But you can submit your draft as a Word file or just copy and paste the text in there. I would suggest putting it in as a Word file. But you do have access to the Writing Center, and you can get feedback from the Writing Center as a distance student. So it's an important resource that I hope you know that you have if you are registered as a distance student, and if you are someone who's on campus, not registered as a distance student, but is still in this class, you can use the service too, or make an appointment with someone in the Writing Center and actually physically go in and talk to one of the tutors there. Okay, so that takes care of one of the important questions. All right. Now another question for project 2. So this is the project about films, civil rights films. And so one of the questions was, would film reviews or filmmaker interviews be relevant for project 2? Absolutely. So if you're doing that project and looking at films, lots of different resources that you could bring into the project. Just the only limitation is you need to watch all of those films and use all of them, but you can certainly bring in anything else that you want to into the project. Okay. Now, is there a minimum number of newspaper sources for project 1? So this is a difficult question to answer because every project is different and it's going to depend on the quality of your sources. But I'm just going to lay a number out there as a target for you if you're doing one of those big newspaper projects like Project 1. To really have enough sources to start drawing parallels and looking for themes for different natural disasters, I would say as a minimum target, look for, we're looking to use about 30 newspaper articles. Okay, and once you really dive into your sources and research, you'll find that you have they're going to be, the problem for you probably is going to be that there's just too much stuff, not that there's going to be too little. And so 30 is going to be pretty easy to get to. But that's my answer to that question, at least 30. Hopefully it gives you some sort of idea moving forward as you start doing your research. Another piece of advice I would have for you, if you're doing any of the projects that are using the newspaper databases or the magazine databases, is to start, especially for newspapers because it's easy to download, start downloading every article that you think might be useful and putting it into a file now. Otherwise, you're really kind of wasting your time and you're going to have to go back and try to find these newspaper articles. All right, so Fourth question, all of the projects listed databases in which to start with, okay? Does this mean that you prefer we go off the listed materials for this particular project? And this person's talking in particular about project one, but I think more generally too. So I put some databases in there as a starting point for you to start your research and just kind of kick it off. I would prefer that if I've listed a newspaper database or a magazine database, you at least use those, but you are everything else is fair game. If you find another database somewhere, if you find something online with, if you're doing maybe the Army project and you're finding recruitment videos online, everything else is completely fair game. I just wanted to get you started into some databases where I know that there's going to be some good material. But I hope that you branch off and look for some other stuff. It's not necessary to go incorporate more databases or more sites that might have more primary sources, but everything is fair game. And if you want help finding some more databases or some more places to find sources, just contact me and I can work with you on that. Okay, let's get into our Blackboard site. Okay, so for week 7, it's a pretty simple assignment for this week. It's called the Introduction to Research Assignment. And I know that the text is a little bit small. I hope that you can read it on the screen here, but I'll at least read it aloud to you, and you can look on your Blackboard page 2 to see what's here. Okay, so just like our reading responses, due Friday at 11:59 p.m. And there is a button down here that says Introduction to Research Turn-In. This is where you'll turn in this paper as a Word document or a PDF, whichever one you prefer. All right, and so what we're going to do here, really just 3 things. I just want you to choose one primary source from your research and write 1 to 2 paragraphs that explains how that primary source helps you answer the research question that's associated with your project. Okay, and so for a lot of you, that might be just going into the newspaper database, or it might be going into the magazine database. If you chose project 2, which is the film question, what I'd like you to do is watch one of the films on the list. And there are a couple of those films that are on YouTube. So it's not necessary right now for you to have bought some films or requested some films through interlibrary loan or something. At least one of those films is accessible to you right now. So watch one of those films and write 1 or 2 paragraphs about how that film helps you answer the research question. Okay. Now, the next thing I want you to do is find a secondary source and write 1 paragraph that explains how that secondary source helps you answer your research question. Okay. So this is separate from the book that we read for class that might be associated with your research project. And so what we're looking for here is, let's say you're doing the civil rights film project. Maybe you go and look for a book or an article that's talking specifically about civil rights in film. Maybe you look for a book or article that can help you get into one of the events that the films cover. So, for example, Mississippi Burning, one of the films on the list, is about the 1964 murders of 3 civil rights activists in Mississippi working on Freedom Summer, right? So, if you're doing the recruiting and the Army recruiting project, right? Maybe you go out and look for another book or article on Army recruiting in the 1970s or something like that, right? So we're looking for one other secondary source that we might be able to bring in to this project, and you're going to write a paragraph that explains how that secondary source will help you answer that research question. Okay, so pretty simple. And then the third part of this is just to do a separate little works cited section. I put on here page, but just put a works cited section in there. It doesn't have to be on a separate page that cites both of those sources. So you're really only citing two sources, your primary source and your secondary source. Remember, the secondary source is something written by a scholar long after the event. And so we're just citing those two things. And so I put in here, we're going to use Chicago Manual of Style. And this is what we use in history. If you're not familiar with that style, I have some resources here for us. One of those resources is Chicago Style Resource. And one of the sites that I often point undergraduates to is Purdue University's Writing Center. It's a great source, especially to learn how to just cite basic things. So I'll click on that link here. It's going to bring us right to Purdue's Online Writing Lab Chicago Manual of Style, 17th edition. And so if you see over here to the left, it shows you how to cite lots of different things. And so let's say one of our secondary sources is going to be a book. We can go here, shows exactly how to cite it. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things here. So what is this footnote or endnote? So we're not doing that yet. Okay, so this is a works cited page or a bibliography. So that's for this assignment. That's what we're looking for. So bibliography entry. And then down here, you'll see the N and the B correlating to footnote and endnote or bibliography. Okay, and so it shows you exactly how to cite a book using Chicago style. It shows you exactly how to cite periodicals, which are journal articles, which would be a secondary source that we might be using. Shows us how to do magazines, which might be one of our primary sources that we're using. Shows us how to cite newspapers, which is another primary source you might be using. And there are lots of different sources that might come into our research depending on what you're doing that we can look here. So if you're doing films, that would be under audiovisual recordings and other multimedia, and it shows you exactly how to cite those here as well. Okay, and so if there are any questions about citing Chicago style, even after you look at this page, this Purdue Writing Center page, email me and I'm happy to walk you through it, or look if you're worried about it. Send me a citation and I can look at it to make sure it's right. I'm not going to be taking points off because there is one little comma or period missing or something like that. I just want you to see that you've definitely looked at the Chicago Style website and you're at least close at this point, and we can work on perfecting that in the coming weeks. And so I just want to make sure that you're not way off and obviously didn't look at anything on the site for this intro to research assignment. All right, go back. Okay, some other resources I want to point out here that you might not know that you have access to. I was really glad that someone asked that question about the Writing Center, but there's some other resources that you have as a distance student, if you're registered as a distance student, that you might not know that you actually have. And one of them is this document delivery interlibrary loan through our Texas Tech library. You have access to what we call document delivery or interlibrary loan, which means that if the Texas Tech library doesn't have something, whether it's a journal article or a book or a film, you can actually request it through our website, and I'll show you exactly where it is. So this is the Texas Tech University Library website. Right here is this link to document delivery interlibrary loan. I'm just going to click here. Okay, it's going to ask you to sign in using your e-rater. Okay, and I'm already signed in, so it takes me right to the page. And look at all the things that you can request here. So journal articles, books, book chapters, conference papers, media, meaning potentially a film if you want to get that sent to you. And what happens is that normally if you were on campus, so if you're not registered as a distance student but you're taking this class, you can use this. Another library will send that book to our Texas Tech library here in Lubbock, and you'll just go to the library and pick it up, and you'll have it for a couple of weeks. If you're registered as a distance student, what the library will do is actually mail it to your house. All right, it'll mail it to your address. So know that you have this resource and take advantage of it if you need it. So you're not spending hundreds of dollars on extra books that maybe your local library doesn't have. You pay for this resource, take advantage of it. Okay, and if you need any help using that, what I've also put on here in terms of some resources this week is a PDF with instructions on how to use that document delivery interlibrary loan. And so if there are, even after looking at all that stuff, if you still need clarifications, feel free to email me. I'm happy to walk you through it. All right. Another resource I have here is just a reminder that through our library, we have two of the best secondary source databases that our library has is JSTOR and Academic Search Complete. And if I just go back to the library webpage here, I'll show you exactly where to find those. There are actually shortcuts here on the home page that take you right to Academic Search Complete or JSTOR. And so this is where you would find some academic articles, scholarly articles that are secondary sources for your project. And of course up here, we can search directly for books or potentially films that our library has as well. All right. One other thing I want to point out is for the projects that are taking advantage of the newspaper databases. I had some links in there that took you to the newspaper database where they had a list of newspapers. That link ever gets broken, I just want to show you exactly how to get there. Okay, so I'll go back to the library webpage here. So what we're looking for is these databases A to Z. Click on that. Then I go up to this search box, and all I'm searching for are newspapers, and it has to be plural to get all of these. So it's newspapers, plural, not just newspaper. And it takes us right to the link where that link sent you. Okay, and so we have this list of newspapers. We have really good stuff in terms of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, which might be good if you're doing natural disasters for earthquakes potentially. LA Times might be a good one to look at. We have Washington Post. We have a bunch of different newspaper databases here that are great to look at. We have the Baltimore African American, Atlanta Daily World, which are kind of historically black newspapers that might offer, and also the Chicago Defender, that might offer some different perspectives that you might actually find in the LA Times or New York Times or the Washington Post. Now, some of you, or at least one of you, raised some concerns that so these are great databases, but if you were doing hurricanes, maybe the Miami Herald might be a great resource that obviously we don't have access to. If you're doing tornadoes, maybe something in Texas or Oklahoma would be a great resource, but obviously we don't have databases for that. I do want to show you one site is proprietary, but I'll show you kind of a way to get around it a little bit. So it's newspapers.com. Okay, and so if you just Google newspapers.com, it'll take you to this website. Now, newspapers.com is not a free site, and that our library doesn't have access to it. But there is an option here for 7 days free, and so it has just a huge number of newspapers that we don't have access to. I'm sure that the Miami Herald is in here. I think the Dallas newspaper is also in here. But if you want access to a broader number of newspapers, what I would suggest is going to newspapers.com, sign up for this 7-day free trial. Okay, and make sure to cancel it within 7 days so you don't have to pay for it. And look for those newspapers and some articles, and just download as many articles as you can in that week, and cancel the subscription and use those articles for yourself. Okay, so that's one option that you have here. If you don't like the databases that we actually have, another option for you. Okay. One other thing that I want to point out that I've uploaded to the site here. If we can get over here. All right, you'll see a link here to Research Prospectus, which is due in a couple of weeks. And I put it up here because it's a bigger assignment than the Introduction to Research assignment, which likely won't take you that much time. What I'd like you to start working on this week is not only the Introduction to Research assignment, but also the Research Prospectus, which is due in 2 weeks. All right, so I'm going to bring it up. Make it a little bit bigger. All right. So what this asks you to do is to create sort of a kind of project outline for your specific project. All right, and so it forces you to do a little bit of historiography, a little bit of a project description to give me a better idea of your primary sources thus far. Again, this is going to be 2 weeks out, so you'll have a lot more primary sources than you do today. All right, and so I've broken this down into a few different sections here, and I've tried to be as specific as I can. Okay, so the introduction to this research prospectus. And prospectus is really another word for proposal, so you can think about it as a research proposal. So what I've asked you to do is to start here by drawing the reader in with an anecdote or a scene-setting description. And I've given you an example of a past research project. Someone else, this is from a research prospectus of another student who eventually wrote a really good paper. So when we get to your actual paper and we start writing that, one of the good ways to actually start a paper is with sort of kind of a quick story to draw people in. And so this is an example here from this project on the House of Un-American Activities Commission from the 1940s and 1950s. And so he has this sort of kind of short story or scene-setting description that brings things together in that first paragraph. And in the second paragraph, he gives you kind of a broad idea of what he's actually doing. And again, this student is, when he started writing this, is at the same point that you're at in your own research. Okay? And so after you do that, the most difficult part of this, likely for you, is going to be this historiography part. All right. And so the first step in this historiography part is to outline how the scholar relevant to your research. And so remember, if you're doing the project on natural disasters, the scholar relevant to your research is Steinberg. If you're doing the civil rights project, the scholar relevant to your research is Theo Harris. If you're doing the project on the Army, the scholar relevant to your research is Bailey. And no one has said that they're going to do the last two projects, so we just throw Morton out, I guess. And so what we're trying to do here is trying to figure out how that scholar answers your research question. Right? And I've designed every single project to ask a research question that a scholar has answered in our readings, right? So you're going to have to go back, if you don't know that answer already, go back to the book associated with your project and write a paragraph or so about how that scholar approaches your research question, right? The second step of the historiography then is to explain how your project is going to answer that question. And I know it's really early right now, but you should be able to, over the next couple of weeks as you do some more research, be able to at least offer a bit of a hypothesis based on your early research, how you're going to answer that question, okay? And what I want you to do here is explain whether that hypothesis supports or challenges your scholar's arguments, right? So if you're doing the Civil Rights Film Project, you're going to talk about whether your hypothesis supports or challenges Theo Harris's arguments about the popular memory of the civil rights movement, right? So if this is a bit too complicated, or if you're still confused, again, just email me and we can clarify things via email, or we can talk over the phone or Skype. But this is a really important part of this paper, the historiography section, and so we want to make sure that you kind of understand these two steps. All right, project description. So this is the part where you kind of tell me how far along you are in your research. I want you to explain what sort of primary sources are you going to be using and be as specific as you possibly can, right? Think about the specific newspapers that you're actually looking at, what you've found so far, right? Give me an outline of the sources that you're going to be using and have found so far in this particular section. And again, the more research you've done over the next week or so, the easier that section is actually going to be to complete. And then I want you to, in this conclusion, to tell me where you are in your research. Do you need to spend another week going through the databases? Where are you in this research? Or is a lot of research still necessary? Are you basically done with the research? Let me know, okay? And then we want to create some targets. And so after the prospectus is turned in, the next thing that you're going to be working on is the rough draft. All right, and so when do you think that you're going to have a rough draft finished? When's your target date to have that finished? If you want to send it to the Writing Center, you know that you need to have that into the Writing Center several days before the rough draft is due, so they have time to give you feedback on it, right? Another question is, what is the biggest obstacle in finishing this? And then is there something specific that I can help you with, whether it's kind of helping you search for some more databases, or you're kind of struggling to get some sources together and you might want to have some help finding some new search terms maybe. So wrap all of that up in the conclusion. And then in the bibliography for this, I want it split into two sections. One section on primary sources, where you cite in that bibliography all of the primary sources that you found so far and you plan to use, and all the secondary sources you found so far and plan to use. And again, that should be in the Chicago Manual of Style. And so this entire paper is going to be 4 to 6 pages long. Okay, so again, much longer than the Intro to Research assignment that's due this week that shouldn't take you that long. And so I want you to start on this prospectus this week as you're working on the Intro to Research assignment. Some just basic rules: double space, Times New Roman, should be in 12-point font like everything else, no title page. And then I have a breakdown of how I look to grade this. And one of the big questions that I look for when I'm grading this is whether this project looks viable, right? In terms of the sources that you're planning to use and where you are in this project. Does it look like you are going to be able to complete this thing by the end of the semester? And the other thing that I'm looking for is your understanding of the historiography. Okay, I want to know that you understand how your scholar has answered that big research question, where you fit in. And then I start taking points off if you're really lacking, if I have some serious concerns about viability, or you have some pretty big weaknesses in terms of your understanding of the historiography, or really where you are in the research so far. Okay, so again, if you have questions about this, don't hesitate to email me or set up an appointment to talk. I really want you to start working on this week and not start on it Monday, a week from now, because it's going to be difficult to complete if you just start working on it and try to complete it in just 4 or 5 days. Okay? All right, so again, any questions? Email me. We can set up a Skype session. We can set up a phone call. I'm always here for you. And so if I don't get an email or something from you, good writing, good research, and I'll see you next week.